Hey guys, my name is Benjamina Aboihi and I'm super excited to bring you a recipe from my new cookbook, A Good Day to Bake. We're going to be making some spiced lamb sausage rolls today, and I'm starting with my rough puff pastry. I've got about a cup of unsalted butter in my flour, and it's cold butter. When we're making puff pastry, we need our butter to be cold. And I'm just going to add in about half a teaspoon of salt. So all you want to do at this stage is just rub the butter into the flour with your fingertips. We don't need our butter to be like super fine. We just want some large lumps in our flour, and that's going to help us get lots of flaky layers. Try and like flatten it out a little bit so it gets nice and broken up and coated in flour. So I'm using rough puff pastry for these sausage rolls because it's so much quicker than using puff pastry. It's like a good introduction into pastry if you're a little bit scared of it or you've not really made it before. It's literally in the name. It's a bit rough and ready. You can make it quite quickly and you still get those like buttery, flaky layers. So that looks about ready. I've got lumps about that size, and that's what you're looking for at this stage. And so what I'm going to do is make a little well in the center and then just go in with a little bit of ice cold water. And we don't want to go in with it all at once. So the recipe says about 7 to 8 tablespoons of cold water. And it's not an exact number because it just varies so much depending on your flour, on the humidity in the room, where you are. So start with a little bit and then add a bit more as you go on. So I'm just going to put a little bit in the middle. And I'm going to give it a good stir with a table knife. I'm not going to go in with my hand straight away because I might just like overwork the pastry. So gently, gently with a little table knife, give it a good stir. And you'll see it's going to start clumping up and binding together. It's still a little bit dry at the moment, so I'm just going to add in a bit more water and then give it another good stir. So it's starting to come together. There's still a bit of dry bits at the bottom, but I'm gonna go in with my hands and just slowly bring it together. So I'm not trying to knead it at this point. I just want to start binding it into one mass. And once that looks like a really shaggy ball of dough, what I'm gonna do is just turn it out onto my counter, like so. And at this point, it does look a little bit crazy. You're thinking, how is this gonna get into a nice ball of pastry? But I'm gonna squeeze it a little bit with my hands to bring it into one mass. And you can see there are like chunks of butter, and that's what you want. You wanna see those lovely little butter flakes in there. So bring it together very gently. And then all I'm gonna do now is get my rolling pin and start rolling it out very gently. So you want to just start rolling it out into a rough rectangle. Some people will say like make sure it's X by X wide. It doesn't need to be perfect at this point. So just roll it out into a rough rectangle like so. And what we're going to do at this stage is fold it up like a letter. Fold it into thirds, and this is what's going to start giving us our layers in our rough puff pastry. So the top half, the top third comes down like so, and then the bottom third goes on top like that. And that is called our first turn. And it does look a little bit crazy. It looks really lumpy. It doesn't look perfect. But as we continue to fold and chill and work in layers, it's going to smoothen out into a really nice soft dough to work with. So what I'm going to do is wrap this in a bit of cling film and then chill it in the fridge for about half an hour to 40 minutes until it's nice and firm. I wrote most of this book, if not all of this book, during the pandemic, during lockdown, and it was a time where I saw loads and loads of people either picking up baking for the first time or returning to baking after a bit of time away. People had more time on their hands to actually just slow down and bake. And so a lot of the recipes are inspired from that time. Just seeing people really just enjoy being creative again. And so I wanted to create a book that kind of, you know, celebrated that time of kind of slower baking, slower cooking, and enjoying the process of baking a lot more. And so a lot of the focus is on the flavor of things rather than making them like picture perfect and pretty and, you know, but it's really good flavored bakes that are for every mood. So my dough has been chilling for about 30 to 40 minutes and it's nice and firm, and I'm just going to give it another couple of rolls and turns to create even more layers in our rough puff to get lovely flaky pastry. So I'm just going to dust my surface with a little flour. Not too much, we're not making bread or anything, just enough so it doesn't stick. I'm just going to start rolling this out again into another large rectangle. Give it a turn every now and again so it doesn't stick. Just going to make it a little bit wider on this side. So for our next term, we're going to do exactly the same thing. Bring the top third down, over, and you'll see the difference between the first time we did it. It's a lot smoother and a little bit more elastic. So top third comes down, bottom third goes up. Give it a turn and then rewrap this, stick it back in the fridge to chill again for another half an hour. So I've got my minced lamb here, which is the meat that I've chosen, just because it's really good in like a merguez sausage kind of vibe. You could use pork if you prefer, but I really love the flavor that lamb brings to these sausages. I've also got some dried apricots, and I love the sweetness, little pops of sweetness that it brings to the really salty sausage rolls, so it's a nice contrast. I've got some breadcrumbs. These are just fresh white breadcrumbs that I've blitzed up in a food processor, and it's just gonna help keep these nice and moist and not really dry out too much. I've also got a lemon. I'm just gonna add the zest to this just to brighten everything up and give it some nice citrusy notes. And for our spices, I've got a mixture here. I've got some fennel seeds, which I personally love in almost everything. They're a really nice like licorice aniseed kind of flavor. And I've also got some cumin seeds as well and some ground coriander. And this is just gonna make it nice and fragrant and delicious and wonderful. I've got some harissa paste, which adds a little bit of heat. If you like things super spicy, feel free to add a little bit more or a little bit less if you want it more of a milder flavor. And a couple cloves of garlic, because garlic in everything is always a very good idea. So just start with a little bit of olive oil straight into your pan and let that heat up. And then go straight in with your diced onions. We're just going to let that cook for about 2-3 minutes. You just want them to soften. We don't want any color on them, so just keep an eye on your heat so it's not too hot. Next, straight in with your 2 cloves of garlic. Just finely mince them and then straight in the pan. And then give it another stir for about a minute or so. And at this point, it's going to start smelling amazing because onion and garlic is just a perfect combination. So once your garlic is really fragrant, we're going to go in with our spices. So our fennel seeds and our cumin go straight in, as well as our ground coriander. And then give it another good mix. We just want to release those really yummy flavors of our spices. So just about a minute or so just to toast them up and get them smelling absolutely delicious. And once that's smelling super, super fragrant, just go straight in with your harissa. And then cook that out for another minute or so. And then your mixture is going to get nice and dark and it's just going to smell absolutely divine. So our harissa oniony spicy mix is done and it's cooled. And now all we need to do is just get everything in the bowl and give it a good mix. So that goes straight in. And I've got some salt. And I've got some chopped apricots, and these are dried apricots. I like mine quite like on the chunky side, so you can cut them up a little bit smaller if you want them more fine, but I think it's nice when you get a big chunk of apricot in each sausage roll, so I keep mine on the chunky side. So they go in. My breadcrumbs straight in there as well. And just the zest of a lemon. And this is just going to brighten everything up. So everything's in our bowl, and all we've got to do is mix. You can use a spoon or a spatula, but I just like to get in with my hands. And obviously when you're like seasoning raw meat like this, a filling, you obviously can't just try it and see if the seasoning level's right. So you could just like break a little bit off and fry it off in a pan and taste it to see if you've got enough salt in there, then you can adjust accordingly. So my mixture looks really well incorporated. There's the apricots and the onions and all the spices mixed nice and evenly through there. So all we need to do now is assemble. I'm gonna unwrap my pastry and then just dust my surface with a little bit of flour. So I'm gonna roll this out a lot bigger than I've been rolling out the other turns. And I'm gonna make it about 1/4 of an inch thick. We don't want it too thick because we don't want more pastry than filling, but we equally don't want it too thin. And as you can see, mine is very wonky. So I'm just gonna square off the sides so we get nice, perfect rectangles. They don't need to be perfect, but just to make it a bit more even. And don't throw this away, just bake it and then you have a snack. So now I'm just gonna cut this straight down the middle, and this is gonna give me 2 longer rectangles so I can make 2 lines of sausage rolls. So straight down the middle like so. One and 2. And next I'm just gonna grab my filling and then make 2 lines of filling down the middle. So you can grab a spoon, you can use your hands, but just start at the top and work your way down. And just leave enough of an edge on each side because we're going to fold this over and stick it down. So they are quite fat, as you can see, but it just means there's more to eat. Right, filling is all in. Now we're just gonna fold them over and make a roll. But before we do that, I'm gonna brush the edge with some egg wash. So let me wash my hands and I'll be back. I've got 1 egg in this bowl and I've just given it a quick whisk to break it up. And then just brush down one side of your pastry. And this is just gonna help it stick when we roll it over. Right, now assembly. Start from one end and then very carefully take your time to make sure it's completely encased, like so. And just tuck it under so your seam is underneath, like so. And then roll it seam side down so it doesn't open up. And that is one very big roll. I'm actually going to turn this to make it easier. I'm going to cut it in half, which is about there. And then I'm going to cut each into 3 So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 6. And we've got our sausage rolls. So I'm going to place them on my baking tray, like so. These are going to go and chill in the fridge for about 15-20 minutes. But in the meantime, make sure to like and subscribe below to see more Food 52 content. I do think this book has a little something for everyone. If you've never baked before, you're definitely going to find some easy recipes to kind of get your toes wet and play around with. But if you are a more experienced baker, there are some really cool techniques and ways to incorporate flavors and ingredients that you may not have used before. And so I hope I can give you some classics to add to your repertoire. These have had a little bit of time to rest in the fridge and they're feeling nice and cold and firm. So the last thing we need to do before we can finally bake them is just give them a little bit of an egg wash. And this is going to give us a beautiful golden shine. And last but not least, I'm just going to top with a mixture of white sesame seeds and black onion seeds. One, because it just looks really, really pretty and it just adds a little bit of crunch on the top as well. And just a little bit of sea salt on top of each one. So now I'm going to bake these in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 200 degrees Celsius for 35 to 40 minutes until they are really golden brown and crisp and bubbly and sizzly and delicious. And they smell absolutely divine. You want to let them cool for a little bit, 10-15 minutes. You don't want to eat them when they're still piping hot. So they're still warm to the touch. That pastry is so flaky. And you get a nice bit of the apricot, so you get that sweetness, and it's not too spicy because you didn't put too much harissa. But these are very, very good. You should go and make them. Thank you for joining me on this video as I made my spiced lamb sausage rolls from my book. Next week, I'll be back making my squash and nigella seed soda bread. You don't want to miss it. In the meantime, check out the videos here for some more content from Food 52.